It is almost midnight, and there are two tabs open on your screen. You finally bought the power station, and now you need a panel to feed it. In the first tab, a 100-watt solar panel for around $50. In the second tab, another 100-watt panel, the same number printed right there on the listing for $140. 3 times the price for what looks like the very same thing. And you are sitting there at midnight trying to work out whether the cheap one is a steal or whether you are about to bolt a slow disappointment to your roof. So you do the sensible thing and put the two spec sheets side by side. Both say 100 watts, both say monocrystalline, both hand you the same little row of numbers. And here is the first strange thing. Neither of these panels will ever make 100 watts. Not on your roof, not on your best day, not once. The number printed on the front was measured in a place your panel is never going to sit. And here is the second strange thing, the one this whole video is built around. Some of these competing brands are not competing at all. 3 of the 5 panels people agonize over are, as far as the cells and the glass are concerned, the same panel. Solar crept up on the off-grid world. 10 years ago, a panel was a specialist item you ordered from a specialist. Now every power station company, every camping brand, and every hardware chain sells one, and the search box has turned into a swamp. Type in a 100-watt solar panel, and the results throw 3 completely different products at you as if they were the same. Rigid glass panels made to bolt down on a roof, folding suitcase panels made to lean against your rig at camp, and thin flexible panels made to glue flat to a curved surface. All wearing that same 100-watt badge, all stacked on one results page, all pretending to be interchangeable. They are not, and the differences are exactly where the money hides. And behind the number sits a wall of names: Renogy, Rich Solar, HQST, New Power, YZ, EcoWorthy, Top Solar, Bougie RV, and 100 more you have never heard of. A buyer looks at that wall and makes a reasonable assumption that each name is a different company building a different panel, and that the pricey ones must be building something better. On this particular shelf, that assumption is close to backwards. A big slice of that wall is a handful of factories selling one panel under many labels at many prices. The people who install these for a living already know that. The people buying them almost never do. And there is a tell that separates those two groups. A buyer shops by the badge and the watt number on the front. A trade installer shops by 3 things the listing barely mentions: what is actually sitting inside the little box on the back of the panel, whether that panel will hold its rating once it is hot, and who will still be selling a matching one in 3 years when yours finally dies. Same shelf, 2 completely different ways of reading it. By the end of this, you will read it the way the second group does. And it begins with the one number every listing leads with, because it is the number that fools the most people. When a panel is called 100 watts, that figure did not come from a roof. It came from a labby bench, under something called STC, Standard Test Conditions. Picture it. The panel is hit with a very specific, very bright light. And this is the part that matters. Its cells are held at 77 degrees. Cool, bright, flawless. That is the exact and only place where the full 100 watts lives. Now carry that same panel out to where you actually use it. Flat sun on a dark roof, no shade, no breeze, and the surface climbs past 140 degrees. And a solar cell has a cruel little habit. The hotter it gets, the less it makes. For every degree it climbs above that cool lab number, it quietly hands back a sliver of its output. By the time it is baking on your roof in July, 15 to 16% of the rating is simply gone, before you have counted a single cloud, a bad angle, or a film of dust on the glass. Which is why, when careful reviewers put a 100-watt panel on a meter in real sun, the good ones settle around 70 watts. The honest answer to how much a 100-watt panel makes is closer to 70. 80 on the sticker would already be generous. And that gap between the lab number and the real number has a second edge, and this is the spec the listings bury. How fast a panel sags as it heats is its own hidden number, and it is almost never printed where you can see it. Two panels can wear the exact same 100 watts and give it back at very different rates once the sun is really on them. So the figure on the front of the box is not a promise of what you will get. It is a lab result under conditions your roof will never see. And the entire game across all 5 of these is working out which panel surrenders the least of that number when it actually matters. Start with the one the whole category gets measured against, because for years the reviewers have reached for it as the yardstick, and when you use it, you understand why. The Renogy 100-watt monocrystalline runs around $90 as of today. For that, you get the best real-world output in this group, the good end of that 70-watt band, a genuinely stiff aluminum frame, and the thing that quietly matters most and never shows up on a spec sheet, a company that is still standing there when something goes wrong. Renogy grew out of a student project at a Louisiana university into the default American off-grid brand, and it backs the panel with a real warranty and a support line that actually answers. The newer panels use a higher grade cell and carry a long output warranty, which sounds like marketing until you remember that the whole game is what the panel still makes years from now, hot and weathered, not what it read new on a bench. What it does badly is simply that it costs more, and a real chunk of that extra is the name and the support desk, not a better cell underneath. Hold on to that thought, because it is the whole episode in one sentence. Everything from here gets measured against this exact panel, and the first measurement is about to get uncomfortable.
Because here is the first budget name and the first crack in the wall. HQST sells a 100-watt panel that looks like the Renogy, reads like the Renogy on the spec sheet, and in blind side-by-side tests performs like the Renogy, for around $55. That is nearly half price for, on paper and on the meter, the same panel. And that is not a coincidence, and it is not really a rumor either. Ask around the off-grid forums, and the same line comes back over and over. HQST and Renogy are clones, widely believed to roll out of the same factory, and more than one longtime seller will tell you flatly that they share the same owner. One installer who buys them by the crate for truck camper builds puts it plainly, they are on par with Renogy, he has fitted them half a dozen times, no complaints. What HQST does badly is the part the meter cannot show you. The warranty is thinner, the support is slower, and if a panel quits in year 3, you are far more on your own than you would be with the pricier badge. So the cheap one is not a worse panel. It is the same panel with less of a company standing behind it, which raises a genuinely uncomfortable question about what that extra $40 on the Renogy is really buying. If pulling 2 identical panels apart to show you exactly where the money goes is the kind of thing you want more of, subscribing is how the next one finds you. Which brings us to the third name, and the moment the pattern stops looking like an accident. Rich Solar sells a 100-watt panel with, once again, near identical specs to the Renogy, priced in the middle of the pack at around $85. Owners who have run both on the same roof keep reporting the same dull truth. They cannot tell the panels apart in use, and the real difference is the color of the label and the number on the price tag. What Rich Solar does well is show up on a budget with solid build quality, and, in the big public output tests, real numbers sitting right in the same 70-watt neighborhood as the rest. In fact, the single most watched real-world panel test on the platform, well over 1 million views, puts a rock-bottom hardware store 100-watt panel head-to-head with a Rich Solar 100-watt on a meter, and the gap between them is nothing like the gap in the marketing. What it does badly is the usual budget tax, thinner support, and kits that sometimes ship with a cheaper, older-style controller you will end up wanting to replace. But the headline here is not the panel. It is the spread. Renogy at 90, Rich Solar at 85, HQST at 55. 3 names, 3 prices, and underneath, as far as the cells and the glass go, essentially 1 panel. Sit with that for a second, because that spread is the thesis of this entire channel printed on 3 price tags. Now, for contrast, a panel that is genuinely its own thing and earns its place by being honestly cheap instead of secretly the same. New Power sells a 100-watt panel for around $70, and it is the value pick for a reason. Put it head-to-head with the Renogy, and it lands a little behind. In one careful day-long test, it produced about 16% fewer watt-hours, roughly 500 watt-hours in a day, against the Renogy's 570, but it also costs less, carries a long warranty on paper, and never once pretends to be the premium panel. You get a little less, you pay a little less, and the trade is played straight. What it does badly is exactly that small output gap, which matters a lot if your roof space is tight and matters not at all if it is not. And a paper warranty, however long, is only ever as good as the company still being there to honor it. But notice what makes New Power the good citizen in this lineup. It is not wearing another company's panel and marking it up. It is its own modest panel at a modest price, sold as exactly what it is. On this shelf, that almost counts as a virtue. And finally, the one that is not really the same kind of product at all, which is precisely the point. The Jackery Solar Saga 100 watt is a folding panel, not a rigid one, and it runs around $140. You are not paying that premium for more watts. On a meter, it lives in the same range as everything else here. You are paying for the fold, the built-in kickstand, the handle, the fact that you can carry it out at camp, aim it at the sun, and pack it away in the evenings. So this is a partial comparison, and I will keep saying so out loud. A folding panel and a bolt-down panel are answering two different questions. What the Jackery does well is convenience, and for a lot of power station owners, that convenience is worth real money. What it does badly is cost per watt, because it is the most expensive way to buy 100 watts in this whole group. And here is the quiet trap with folding panels from the big power station brands. The panel is often built to marry that brand's own battery on that brand's own cable, and walking it over to a different power station later can mean chasing adapters or finding it simply will not connect. The rigid panels all speak the one universal connector. Some of these pretty folding ones speak only their maker's dialect. Pay the premium with your eyes open. It is buying you portability, not power, and sometimes a leash you did not notice. Before the last piece, spend 1 minute reading these the way the installer does, because this is where the real quality lives once you are past the watt number. First, the junction box, the little sealed box on the back where the wires leave the panel. On a good panel, it is properly weatherproofed and the parts inside are decent. On a corner cutting panel, it is the first thing to let water in and quit. Second, the connectors in the cable. The universal standard is a connector called MC4, and the honest panels use real ones on thick cable. The cheap ones use thinner wire and looser connectors that warm up and waste the very watts you are trying to collect. And some budget brands are openly inconsistent about it, good connectors one production run and poor ones the next. And third, if the panel arrives as a kit with a controller in the box, look hard at that controller, because a cheap kit loves to pad its price with an older, dumber controller you will want to bin almost immediately. None of those three things is the number on the front. All three are what the trade actually buys. So step back and look at the five together. Three of them, Renogy, Rich Solar, and HQST, are at the level of the cells and the glass. The same panel wearing three labels at three prices, $90, $85, and $55. One of them, New Power, is its own honest budget panel, a little less output for a little less money. And one, Jackery, is a different shape sold for convenience, which means the $55 panel and the $90 panel are not the cheap one and the good one. They are the same one. The gap between them is a warranty and a support desk, not a better piece of glass. Here is the dimension even a careful buyer misses, and it is where people quietly lose the most money, because it stays hidden for a year before it shows its face. Everything so far has been rigid glass, but scroll the same search and you will find flexible panels, thin, light, frameless, made to glue flat to a curved roof.
They photograph beautifully, and they solve a real problem on a rounded van or a boat. And a whole slice of them are quietly built to fail. The trap is the surface. The good flexible panels use a coating called ETFE, which shrugs off years of hard sun. The cheap ones use a plastic called PET, and on a hot roof it starts to cloud and yellow, often within 18 months to 3 years. Once it yellows, less light reaches the cell, and the output just slides. That 100-watt panel that made 70 in year 1 is making 40 by year 2, and then it starts to bubble and peel at the edges. And the second half of the trap is the install itself. Glue any panel flat to a roof with no air gap, and you trap heat underneath it, and you already know what heat does to output. The people who field track thousands of these panels find flush-mounted ones losing north of 20% a year, while the very same panel with a 10mm air gap under it loses less than 5. Same panel. The whole difference was a finger's width of air. And heat does one last nasty thing to a glued down panel. The strong tape people bond them with softens as it gets hot. So through a desert summer, a flush-mounted panel can slowly creep and lift at a corner, right where the yellowing and the peeling already began. The installers who climb on a lot of roofs see the same grim timeline over and over, yellowing inside a year, blisters by year 2, a panel not worth keeping by year 3. So if you go flexible, buy the ETFE surface, give it room to breathe, and mount it so you can get it back off, or you are bolting on a panel with an expiration date you cannot see. Go back to those 2 midnight tabs. The $50 panel and the $140 panel were never really the choice. The real choices were hiding underneath the whole time. Whether the watt number on the box is 1, this panel can actually get near in real heat, or a lab result it will never touch. Whether the badge you are paying up for is a genuinely different panel, or the same panel with a better warranty bolted behind it. And whether the surface and the mounting will still be making power in 3 years, or quietly yellowing in the sun while you wonder where your amps went. Get those 3 right, and the panel very nearly picks itself. So before you check out of either tab, do 3 quick things and they cost you nothing. Take the watt number on the front and knock a third off it in your head, because that is roughly what you will really see, and then compare the panels on that honest number instead of the sticker. Find out who is actually behind the badge and whether they will pick up the phone in year 3, because on this shelf the same panel sells for wildly different money based on exactly that. And if a thin, flexible panel is tempting you, find the letters ETFE before you buy and give it room to breathe. Do those 3, and you stop paying for a lab number and start paying for the watts you will actually get. And if watching one number quietly decide an entire category is your kind of thing, the one to watch next is the video on portable power stations. The box every one of these panels plugs into, where the biggest battery number on the label turns out to be the one hiding the most.